Hello everybody, Nick here, and welcome to this bonus video for my first Twoniversals video, which is a review of the audio drama, The Slide. The Slide is a seven-part sci-fi audio drama written by Victor Pemberton, broadcast in February and March 1966, and the story would serve as a basis for the Doctor Who story Fury from the Deep. The audio drama comes as an extra on disc 3 of the Fury from the Deep DVD and Blu-ray, which was recently released, and the story of which I have recently reviewed on the Universals channel. Furthermore, the slide was originally written as a Doctor Who script in 1964, so it was probably planned to be a season 3 story, but it was rejected. However, Victor Pemberton kept the story and just changed a few things to serve as its own radio drama, and then later, as I said, it became Fury from the Deep. Changing quite a few elements, but more or less the audio more or less is the basis of that story, kind of like how the Big Finish audio Jubilee serves as the basis for the 2005 episode Dalek, written by Robert Shearman, who also wrote the audio. This is a fantastic audio. We should probably talk about it at some point. The plot of the slide sees a new town in Kent. So new town is basically, after the Second World War, new towns were built for new housing and new businesses and new developments and stuff. Some villages got new towns built around them. I live in a town called Bishop Stortford, which is an old town with new bits later added. But not too far away is a new town called Harlow, which was built slightly to the west of the old Harlow village, which has been incorporated into the town of Harlow itself. We've even had a resurgence in new towns, like places in like Camborne in Cambridgeshire, for instance, have becoming new towns. The new towns were all arranged in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, following the Second World War, and this is a new town in Kent where the story is being set. However, recently, there have been cracks forming in the crust of the Earth under the North Sea, and in the ocean. And soon, cracks and earthquakes start being apparent in this small new town, as well as across the country. It turns out that the Earth itself is fighting back against humanity, causing earthquakes, causing cracks, and causing hypnosis to people to start to not believe in the sun as their god, and to supposedly be free. All the while, mud gurges out from the cracks from time to time and becomes a deadly force. There's also quite a lot of really scary sounds, scary and dreadful sounds. So that's basically what happens. The characters I can't remember all of the characters' names, but we do include a Professor Gomez, played by future master actor Roger Delgado, investigating what's going on, alongside various other characters, including a medical doctor, who to me sounds a lot like Paul McGann. So if this story ever got remade, it probably won't, but if it ever got remade, I would love Paul McGann to be in that role. In fact, that guy seems to be like a third main character after Gomez, and this MP guy who slowly over time gets possessed by the hypnosis. He's basically this MP guy is basically the Robson of this story, except he meets a less happy ending than Robson did in Fury from the Deep. I'll talk about him in a bit, but this medical doctor character seems to be like an additional main character to Gomez and the MP, Hugh Deverell. So it's interesting to follow this guy. In fact, he's kind of like the Mr. Harris character from Fury from the Deep, due to this character's girlfriend being the first victim of the hypnosis and the mud, and feeling very unwell. Thankfully, these two, I think, get a happy ending. We don't really hear his girlfriend Janet at the very end. She's recovering, but we don't really hear them get back together. So, not get back together, reunite. So we just presume they're okay, but we just don't hear it. But yeah, this character goes through quite a lot in this story, and he helps out quite a bit. with the story. There's also these other two professor characters who also help Professor Gomez investigate what's going on. The MP Hugh Deverell, he's a bit of a tricky character, as he's obsessed with his new. He wants to build this new town. He wants to make sure people are happy, although he's pissing off quite a few farmers in the meantime. Um, and over time, he starts to be controlled by the sentient. Well, I say the sentient muds, the hypnosis, by the powers of the world, because it is basically the villain of this story is basically the Earth. The Earth itself is basically the villain. Well, it's not really said that there was anything else. It was basically the Earth using hypnosis and mud and earthquakes, and that's the villain. The villain is the planet. Suppose this story is an environmental sci-fi story, then I guess. But at least in Fury from the Deep, we sort of get an establishment of what the creature is in part 3 of that story. We sort of get an understanding of what's going on. Must have missed that bit when I watched the reconstruction versions, because I had no idea what the villain was apart from seaweed and foam. Thank goodness for the animation. There's also a few other characters, including a couple who own a farm, a Tug Wilson and his wife. The latter is voiced by future Professor Sprout from the Harry Potter films, Miriam Margolyes. And we also have Hugh Deverell's wife, who they seem to be in a kind of a odd relationship. They love each other, but she's kind of having second thoughts about the whole thing, and she starts to fancy Professor Gomez, or starts to find him a shoulder to cry on for part of the story. And there is a bit of a domestic talking. There's a bit of domestic talking in episodes 2, 3, and 4. And whilst character development is great, and it's great to understand these characters, the domestic stuff does slow down the story around parts 3, 4 time-ish. In fact, the story itself kind of comes to a kind of a meander, slow pace around episode 4. It gets quite draggy around the middle, with the 3rd, 4th, and 5th episodes. Thankfully, episodes 6 and 7 are pretty quick-paced and pretty interesting and engaging. The first 2 episodes are also pretty interesting of what's going on and how everything is, but by the middle, it's starting to get boring a little bit. And I think the domestic stuff didn't need to be in this. This was a 7-part story. I think it's just there for filler. I mean, I can understand the character motivations, but it just feels like it's padding for the story, especially as there's still a few things at the end that are slightly rushed and not quite explained. So I think maybe we could have cut down on some of the domestic stuff. It's good for to have character development and character understanding, but then there's a difference between that and padding as well. Just saying that. There's also another MP character who comes in about part 5, part 6 time, who basically does nothing. Although the scene where she tries to talk to Deverell in part 5 or part 6 is adapted into Fury from the Deep in its 5th episode, I believe, or 4th or 5th episode. And then there's also a police officer character who helps out, helps around people, and then there's a few other minor supporting characters as well, including a Mrs. Luke, who's kind of like a gobby person, like gob, talking, lots of talking and saying stuff, but she helps out as well. And then, like I said, a few other minor characters, and that's the characters, and I think quite a few of them are done well. I do think there is some stuff with the domestics of certain characters that does feel like padding in the story. It's great for character development, but like I said, there's a difference between character development and padding or filler. And I think there could have been some stuff that could have been ironed out a little bit in the script before it went out. Furthermore, I think at the end, it kind of does have a kind of a quick ending. Fury from the Deep's 6th episode also had a quick ending, but it did then take about 5 to 10 minutes to calm down after the defeat of the seaweed monster, whilst this is cutting it close. This is coming towards the end of the episode. We've got 10 minutes left, and I don't think they've stopped the monster just yet, so we've got to wrap this up quickly. So it feels like the story actually needed more time to explain what the creature was, how they could defeat it, because they only really find out in the last episode, as opposed to Fury from the Deep, where they We find out, we get sort of hinted about it as early as episode 1, episode 2, end of episode 1, start of episode 2, and then we the audience see what its weaknesses in episode 3, and then the characters realize it in episode 5 to put it into use against the seaweed creature. Here, on the other hand, it's a little bit into episode 7 that they find out, and then they have to work out a plan, which seemingly doesn't work to begin with, but then then it does work. But because of all the episodes of build up and other stuff, it does feel like it's a rushed finale. It just feels a little bit rushed. It does feel like maybe we could have an extra episode to explain it a little bit more, and they needed an extra episode to explain it more and to explain what this wasn't a bit better. I think because from what I remember, it seems to be the planet itself is fighting against them. Yeah, that makes sense, I guess. And yeah, the saying that this story should have had an extra episode to explain stuff a bit more. That's saying a lot when this is a 7-part radio play. This is 7 episodes, and it still feels like they needed at least 10 minutes more to explain a few things. And each episode is around half an hour, maybe just under, maybe just over, but it's around half an hour. And I still think they needed an extra 10 minutes at the least to wrap some stuff up. You know what? I thought Fury from the Deep's climax was quite quick, and then it spent 10 minutes having to calm down a little bit and then say goodbye to Victoria. I thought the climax of the story was quite quick with the seaweed and the foam. But to be honest, I think that was actually better paced. That was a better paced climax. It was 6 episodes. We sort of got a hint of how to defeat the villain at the start of episode 2 or the very end of episode 1. And then a better notice of it in episode 3, and then we found out in episode 5 before its use in episode 6. Episode 6 had a quick but pretty good climax, and then we got some time to calm down and then say goodbye to Victoria. And then I think the pacing and the build up of that story was still done really well over the course of 5 to 6 episodes. Whilst the slide, it just is meandering a bit in the middle. It sets up really well, but then it meanders, and then it's a race to the end. And then episode 7 basically Phil has to throw everything in. They do find out that the mud is alive, and there's lots of organisms about episode 5, episode 6 time, but it's still only episode 7 where they actually come up with a way to defeat it. Whilst episode 7 really should have been about actually defeating it, and I think maybe episode 6 towards the end should have been, this is how we're going to defeat it, as opposed to a short time into episode 7. It just feels like the story needed to have another rewrite. It could have rewrite some of it so that things could slow down a little bit in the 7th episode. I like the fast pace and the tension, but it does feel like the climax is a bit abrupt and is a bit too quick and rushed. And then there's only a little bit of time afterwards to recover, only a couple minutes, as opposed to Fury from the Deep, which was a whole 10 minutes, a whole third of the episode. So it is a bit of a rushed ending. It's still a good ending. And still an enjoyable radio play, apart from in the middle. But I think the pacing and what was done in some episodes could have been ironed out a little bit more. I think the best episodes were probably the first 2, because that was some really good setup with some great tension and some great character work. But then after that, it kind of went a bit slow, dull, and boring for the next couple episodes. And then after that, it got really quick and really fast, which was great for the tension. But when we came to actually wrapping up the story, it then ended up being a bit rushed. Overall, The Slide is a good radio drama, but I think it definitely needed some improvements here and there, especially in the middle. And it was good. It had some enjoyable moments. There was some great tension, some great character developments, and I was invested for most of the story. However, there was that sag in the middle where I just started to get bored of it. And the ending probably needed to be expanded a little bit longer. So I will be giving The Slide a 7 out of 10. It's a good story, but like I said, I think it needed to be ironed out a little bit post episode 2. The first two, like I said, I think are really great, but then after that, you need to iron it out, make the third, fourth, and fifth more interesting, and episodes 6 and 7 need to have a bit more explanation of what's going on and to slow down the climax so that it's not doesn't feel like a rushed ending. If you want to check out The Slide, as I mentioned earlier, it is available on disc 3 of the Doctor Who Fury from the Deep DVD, Blu-ray, and Steelbook Blu-ray, and you can also purchase this on CD properly, and there's probably a download version of it as well. So you can get the CD or download of this out somewhere, probably if you're interested. And apparently, elements of this story were not only used for Fury from the Deep, but also for a Doctor Who radio play by Victor Pemberton, which also uses elements from Fury from the Deep, as well as the audio sound effects from this from the slide in that radio play. And it was none other than the Radiophonic Workshop that did the sound effects for this story, which probably gave them a bit of a practice for when they did Fury from the Deep. When they came to do that one, they knew what they were doing. They just had to do something not too similar to this story. Although there are some altered different sounds in Fury. And to say which of the two stories is better, well, I can't speak for the other Doctor Who radio play that Victor Pemberton wrote using elements of both, but out of The Slide and Fury from the Deep, which of the two is better? This one. This one. Fury from the Deep, which I'm sure many of you will be glad to know. But The Slide is still really good, and I do recommend it. You might like it, you might not. I'm not sure. So that's it from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. And was broadcast between, kind of like how the Big Finish Audio Jubilee, which I'm now just going to quickly get out to flash in a moment. The Slide, the story of The Slide sees this small Kent, for example, and other notable new towns include Milton Keynes, Stevenage, Telford, which has been the product of a recent Aimless Wanderings audio. Uh, there's quite a few others difficult to come off the back of my head, but there's been quite a few. If you live in any, or if you know any, drop them in the comments below. Let's get a list. There's another one planned to be built in Cambridgeshire as well. So there's oh well. Anyway, so there's also a few other characters, including a farm couple, one of the wife of who. And whilst I like character development, although the scene where she tries to talk to Deverell is basically remade in the actual in the Doctor Who TV story view. Although the scene where she tries to talk to Deverell in Part 5 or Part 6 does get the adapted. I do think there is a little bit of a domestic padding, domestic stuff. So it does feel like the episode actually needed more time, but it feels like it is kind of because we've had so much build up and in wondering what this is about and meandering and other stuff. Um, it does feel like it does feel really quickly paced. It does feel really rough. Bloody burps. And when and that and slow down the so that's about it from me and this so that's it from me. Thank you for watching and I'll see you. And the radio new Hood and none other than the Radiophonic Workshop where the and it was no um so yeah. But out of the slide and Fury from the Deep, this is the best one. But out of the slide and Fury from the Deep, which is the best version? I will say, however, if you are under the age of 12, I would not recommend it, and I would recommend actually. But the slide is still pretty good, and I would recommend you listen to it.